بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome back to your new semester. So inshallah I'll try to continue where we left off in the last semester. The last session or the last lecture we had here, I will give a brief summary of what we talked about in the last lecture, and then we'll move on to the next part in the book that is mentioned there. So as far as the last lecture goes, we talked about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam being in the battlefield, and we have not started yet what happened after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated to Medina. And it's important for us to understand the things that led to Medina, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated from Makkah to Medina, and he was able to implement the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the very clear distinction we can see from the Meccan life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Medina life. And very clearly, these two phases of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the da'wah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam can distinctly be divided, to the point that Allah Azza wa Jal revealed the Quran to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and later on the Quran is looked at as divided into two parts. One is called Makkiyah, the other part is called the Madani. So the Quran that was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prior to the migration, or the completion of migration as a matter of fact, because fuqaha, they divide the Quran this way, that all the Quran that was revealed prior to the completion of the migration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is referred as all the Quran is referred as Makki. Yeah? The one that was revealed in the Meccan era. It's very important to understand, it's not talking about the Makkah per se is the place that the Quran was revealed. It's talking about the phase or the era when the Quran was revealed. Even though the Quran may have revealed outside of Makkah, that is still considered as Makkah. Similarly, after Rasulullah completed the migration, the Quran that was revealed when Rasulullah was in Medina now after migration, all those ayat in the surahs that were revealed later on, they were referred as the Madani, even though that part of the Quran may have revealed in the Medina or outside of Medina. We know that the Quran was revealed in the Madani era outside of Medina as well, but that part is also referred as still as Medina. So this is an era that divides even the Quran. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu even said, to the point that a person who does not know the distinction between the Makki and the Madani ayat, he does not have the right to do the tafsir of the Quran. So it's one of the key aspects of it to understand, because you cannot understand many a times you cannot understand the cause of revelation if you don't know when the Quran was revealed. So it's important for us to know that even the phases in the Quran was revealed. So that's one aspect of it. Now, so when Rasulullah migrated to Medina, he was of course the leader of the newly formed state of the Muslims over there. When Rasulullah was not only a prophet anymore, he was continued to be prophet of course, but on top of it, he was a hakim as well. He was a ruler as well of the Medina. Now, we talked about last lecture about Sa'ad bin Mu'adh radiallahu anh, when he wanted to go and perform Umrah. And this is one of the things we discussed and how it went. He was one of the leaders of the Medina, and when he went there, he had good relationship with Umayyah bin Khalid, Abu Sufyan. And he wanted to perform the Umrah, but Abu Sufyan said, because of the tension that the Meccans had with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the people who believed in the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought from Allah Azza wa Jal, he said, it's better you perform the Umrah during the noon time. Because noon time is the time that's very hot in Mecca, and people normally used to not come out during that time. If you recall the discussion we had about how Rasulullah migrated, and when he was doing the migration, he went to meet Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh at the noon time. As Aisha radiallahu anha, she reported one of the hadith that Rasulullah used to visit Abu Bakr at the time of the Tarafain, two extreme times, in the morning and in the evening. And this was, but before the migration, he came at noontime, right away. Abu Bakr knew it's something important that Rasulullah is coming at that time. Why he went at that time? As the scholars say, that this is because Rasulullah ﷺ wanted to go at a time that not many people would see him going towards Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Noontime was the time. It was not rush hour, if I call it today's time. It's not the rush hour, it's the time which is very calm at that time, to a point that people used to even have lunch or something, and then they used to do qaylula. Yeah, qaylula is, which is called, I think it's siesta or something they call the nap time after lunch. So yeah, so this is what they used to do at that time. Same thing we see that Abu Jahl, Umayyah bin Khalaf, he told Sa'ad bin Mu'adh to do the Umrah or do the Tawaf of the Kaaba at that time. Now, when he went to do the Tawaf, he ran into Abu Jahl. So we talked about that whole incident. I'm not going to go into the details of every incident today because we're going to move on to the next subject. But the result of this whole thing was he ended up meeting Abu Jahl. And Abu Jahl, he started saying things, harsh words to Sa'ad bin Mu'adh. Sa'ad bin Mu'adh, he did not try to cover up anything. He said, you do know that how we can hurt you. Your caravans for the trade to Sham go from the route of the Medina. We are going to prevent those caravans to pass through. If you're going to harm me or stop me, then I'm going to do this. But anyways, at the end, the result was when Sa'ad bin Mu'adh started replying back to Abu Jahl, Umayyah bin Khalaf, of course, he tried to defend Abu Jahl. And then Sa'ad bin Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, he told him, he heard Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that how Umayyah bin Khalaf will be killed. Now, that was strange. A non-Muslim, a kafir, he is the one he gets surprised, and also he got scared because they trusted Rasulullah to that extent. Even though they did not believe the message, or they rejected the message, the right word, not to say not to believe, because in reality, deep down they knew of it. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But their ego and their hard-headedness or their position that they had in Makkah, that prevented them to accept the message. And hence, at that time when he heard that Rasulullah said these words about Umayyah bin Khalaf, he got scared. And he said, or did he say that he will be killed in Makkah? Or outside Makkah? And Sa'ad bin Mu'adh, I don't know. But Rasulullah mentioned about it. And from there on, Umayyah bin Khalaf was very scared. He was very scared to even get out of the Makkah. And he told even his wife that this is what Muhammad ﷺ said, and his wife said the same thing. Did he say in Makkah, out of Makkah? And he was refusing to go out of Makkah even at the time of Pre-Badr. He refused to go, but later on, Abu Jahl pushed him, and he ended up going, and he got killed. As Rasulullah ﷺ prophesied, of course, Rasulullah ﷺ, whenever he mentioned things like that about the future, that ilm to Rasulullah ﷺ was given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah did not have the knowledge of the ghaib, knowledge of unseen. It's Allah Azza wa Jal who has the knowledge. Okay, so we talked about, the reason I'm bringing this up to understand the concept of that what led to many of the following events that we are going to start discussing from today, why they happened. When we're talking about the battles that happened, or Rasulullah ﷺ was sending Sahaba to do the raids on the caravans of the Quraysh or the Meccans. So this background is important. It's always important to understand all the things in a full context. Sometimes people use the things out of context, and that can misguide us, mislead us. So it's always better to understand the whole picture of it. Same way, when we want to learn about Islam. Islam should be learned and accepted and applied in our life as a whole. Try our best to do whatever, of course, we can only try our best to do all the things Allah Azza wa Jalla has commanded us, and try our best to avoid whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited. Okay, having said all that, and then we see that we talked about the issue of the Meccan leaders. They approached Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul, the head of the Munafiqeen. And they asked him to basically take Rasulullah ﷺ out of Medina and the Sahaba as well. And there was a group of Munafiqeen that Abdullah bin Ubay was able to gather around him. And they started discussing this, and when Rasulullah found out about the intentions, they were building up to do things against Rasulullah and the Muslimin. Then Rasulullah right away went to them directly and talked to them, and when he mentioned to them about the situation that he is aware of, most of the munafiqeen, they backed out. Abdullah bin Ubay, he continued to pursue his goals that he had in mind. But remember that he is a person who basically felt as if there was a coup happened against him when Rasulullah migrated from Makkah to Medina. As the reports talk about, that there was a crown prepared for Abdullah bin Ubay to be made as a king of Medina prior to Rasulullah migrated from Makkah to Medina. Hence, he had the grudge against Rasulullah. And I remember in the beginning, he was not even a Muslim. He became a Muslim later on. Okay. Now, they continued their endeavors to hurt or harm Rasulullah and the da'wah of Rasulullah. And there was a state of fear was created in Medina. Even Rasulullah was mentioned that he was asking, is there a pious companion who can protect me? And then Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu came to Rasulullah as we talked about the hadith reported by Abu Dawood, rahimahullah, that he came and you can hear the armor that he had around his body, punching his armor and walking towards Rasulullah when he asked, Rasulullah asked who was he, and it was mentioned that it was Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, and he said he came as a haris, as a guard. Hence, Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas is remembered as a haris as well, as a guardian of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah continued to have guard until Allah Azza wa Jal that revealed the ayah, Allah ya'asimuka min nas, that Allah will protect you from the people. And after that, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam removed those guards from him because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned that he is going to be protecting Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But remember that in the beginning, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam showed that. So as Muslim, we understand these kinds of actions should be taken. Islam is not about that we just say we do tawakkul Allah, we do the reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we don't use the means. See, tawakkul Allah is, or the talking about trust, having trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or reliance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is part of our iman. It should always be there. It's a must for a Muslim to have a reliance on Allah Azza wa Jal. So it's not connected to an action per se, because it's not like this, you say, oh, I am going to try my best for preparing for the exam, and then I will put my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The trust in Allah or tawakkul does not work this way. Iman, this is a matter of iman. When we talk about tawakkul, the reliance, it's always there prior to action, during the action, and after the action. But when we talk about action, we have to make sure, any action I'm talking about, we have to make sure that action is done according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded, and it is not in disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Now, so what we learned from that, the reason I brought this up, and I highlighted that with some of the examples from the Quran, about Musa alayhi salam, Lut alayhi salam, Dawood alayhi salam, and Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned multiple stories of even the prophets. We know Anbiya were the best among the mankind. Even them, we find them at different instances, they have fear. Fear is an emotion that human beings have. The issue is not that the fear is something wrong. What we do in the state of fear is important. Do we cross the boundaries of Allah Azza wa Jalla to overcome the fear? Any kind of a fear. Look, when the state of fear, all those things happen, it is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us, how we act in those circumstances. Different people are tested differently. Some people are tested with hardships. Other people are tested with ease. So tests can be in a different way. So we see that those prophets were also in the state of fear. And then we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comforted them and reminded them of not to fear except Allah Azza wa Jalla. Okay? Now, today, inshallah, actually, so what are the things that we will be covering today? That includes, we'll talk about some of that first of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after Rasulullah migrated from Makkah to Medina, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed Rasulullah and the Muslimin to fight back now. Okay? Prior to that, so he was not a ruler, Rasulullah when he became a ruler. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted them, giving them permission to fight. One thing. Second, what happened prior to the Badr, Ghazwa Badr? Meaning the battle of Badr that happened, which is the first major battle that happened between the Muslims and the Meccans. So what led to it? So we'll talk about those pre-Badr missions as well. And then what was the purpose of that? To control the commercial routes leading to Makkah. This was one of the main reasons. And then we'll talk about, inshallah, quickly, what is the difference between a Ghazwa and Sariya. Then we'll talk about 3 or 4 of those missions that Rasulullah sent before the Badr. There are actually, the book mentioned about 8. And we'll talk about probably, let's see how the time goes, probably maybe 2, maybe 4. We'll see. Okay. As far as the permission goes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah Al-Hajj. They say, أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَىٰ نَصْرِهِمْ لَقَدِيرٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that permission to fight is given to those believers, of course, talking about who are fighting them against those disbelievers. And because they, believers, have been wrong, and surely Allah is able to give them victory. Okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed them. Look, remember that all our actions have to be driven by hukum of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَنَسُلَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ عَمَّا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, by your Rabb. And this is an interesting thing about the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes the oath of many things. Many of us read, for example, the 30th juz. There are many surahs that start like that. وَالْمُرْسَلَاتِ وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَى وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking the oath of different things. وَالْعَصْرِ, by time, and on and on and on and on. These are the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When it comes to this matter, Allah Azza wa Jal is taking the oath on Himself. وَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَنَسُلَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. By your Rabb, we will ask you all what you used to do. Whatever actions that you have done in this dunya, you are held accountable. Hence, the fuqaha talk about that. For every action, we need a hukum shari. Okay? So hence, when we talk about this, even the battlefield the Muslims were in, it's not that Rasulullah just decided to fight, or Sahaba said, let's fight. No. As a matter of fact, in Makkah era, Rasulullah even Sahaba asked Rasulullah, and Allah reminded them, no, it's not allowed for you yet. Keep your hand tight. But when Rasulullah became a hakim, so as a ruler, it's allowed. See, he's the one who initiated. Now, when it comes to defending, of course, anybody is in that situation where he's under attack or something. Even somebody enters into your home to rob the house or steal something, you defend yourself, you defend your life, you defend your honor, you defend your wealth. It's allowed in Islam. Shut up. So that's defending. But even to go and fight, it comes under, when it comes to going and fighting, we're talking about battles and wars, this is up to the head of the state. Okay? Now, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in other ayat as well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Surah Al-Hajj, الَّذِينَ أُخْرِجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ بِغَيْرِ حَقٍّ إِلَّا أَنْ يَقُولُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ. Then why were they fought, first of all? Those kuffar were attacking the Muslims? Because only they say, our Rabb is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah, but remember that when we talk about Allah is our Rabb, what does that mean? Let's not misguide by this, that Allah is our Rabb means we only discuss about the spiritual aspect of Islam. Islam is a comprehensive way of life, and it gives us all the ahkam regarding everything. All the ahkam regarding everything, whether it's about ibadat, whether it's, when you say ibadat, it means the worship directly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, when you pray, we fast, we go for hajj, and so on and so forth. These are called ibadat, right? And mu'amalat. Mu'amalat means how our dealings are with each other. They also have to be driven by what Allah has revealed. Now, and the third thing is the relationship to ourselves. For example, our clothing, which is called malbusat, makumat, what kind of food we eat, drink, our akhlaq, morals and ethics. That's also part of Islam. We cannot just take one and highly emphasize that and forget about others. To be successful, we have to. It's a must for us to take the Islam as a whole. See, the moment we start taking parts and bits, we really have to question ourselves, why are we taking some parts and leaving the other parts of Islam? Right? I mean, Allah commanded us to enter into Islam completely. And then we started saying, no, I'm going to do this, but that's tough, so I'm going to leave it out. So if we start doing this way, then we are not really, in essence, worshipping Allah in the proper manner. Because now we have made our desires, or our mind is the one that's going to decide what to do and what not to do. What to take from Islam and not to take from Islam. So our intent always should be, we submit to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely. Now, can we make mistakes? Yes. And I have mentioned this before in the past as well. People make mistakes. Okay? Does not mean those mistakes become as a norm. That's the key thing. Mistakes should not become norm. I was actually giving a lecture, and one of the brothers mentioned, actually it was more of a talk. He mentioned a very interesting saying of one of the scholars. He said there is no such thing as a kabira sin if you ask for forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there is no such thing as saghira sin, or small sins, if you don't ask for forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See the problem here? Well, what I mean by this saying is this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ghafurur Rahim. Allah forgives. Even the kabira people do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives. Right? He's most forgiving. He's Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Not I'm saying go and commit sins here, just to be very clear. What I'm saying here is that understand this idea. Even if we have done something, we go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask for forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, when it comes to the small sins, don't think of the small sins are, I'm just keep doing the small sins, not a big deal. Even the small sins, if we continue to do those small sins, and don't feel any kind of a guilt, those small sins are preparing us for bigger sins. Because that's what happens. I think many of you have heard the story of Barsisa, right? From Bani Israel. I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to mention it. Go Google it and check it out. You will see that how one person who was such a pious person, abid, a worshipper of Allah Azza wa Jal, that would not even try to break any law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when he starts following shaitan by taking smaller steps, following the shaitan, ended up even doing the kufr. Ended up dying in the state when he prostrated to shaitan. That's what the story said. Go ahead and read it up. I'm not going to go into this detail of that, but the point is not Barsisa here, because that's a story of a Bani Israel. You can take a lesson from it and learn from the story. Main aspect of that is, don't think of small sins as small sins and keep doing it. Whether they're small or big, if it's done, go return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the key thing, always. Okay. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about what is worshipping Allah, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he's talking about fighting, Allah says, الَّذِينَ إِنَّ مَكَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ أَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَأَمَرُوا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَنَهَوْا عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَلِلَّهِ عَاقِبَةُ الْأُمُورِ. Here Allah Azza wa Jalla is talking about not only that He is giving the permission to fight, why He is giving the permission to fight, is mentioning here. That those Muslims who are the rulers, if we give them power in the land, they order for Iqam Salah, okay, and to pay zakah and enjoy the good and forbid the evil. That's part of that. And of course, the lillahi aqibatul umur, that the end of all matters belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Now, when we talk about Iqam Salah, establishing the Salah, as the fuqaha even discuss about establishing the Salah, does not only entails many times about just Salah. Yes, there are things where you will see it means only Salah as well, but it also means in general all the ahkam of Allah Azza wa Jal come under the category of establishing the Salah. When it comes talking about establishing or talking about from the ruler perspective, it is talking about establishing the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. This is why you find Rasulullah sometimes sent different kinds of wali. Wali is a governor that Rasulullah assigned, and there were like one category of wali was referred as who is implementing all the rules except the financial things, or the zakat. That's why one is called wali zakat, and one was called referred as wali salah as well. Okay. Again, this is a side discussion. Okay. And the second, okay, so there is no doubt among the fuqaha about this idea of when the ruling regarding fighting was given to Rasulullah when it was revealed. It was in Medina. It was not in Makkah. It was only it happened in Medina. Yes, there may be an issue about the exact date and exactly which place this ayah was revealed, but that's not that important. Okay, now prior to Badr, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam started these actions. That included that he sent delegations to patrol the borders of the Medina. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a ruler now, and he is trying to protect the borders of Medina. And not only that, but also make those expeditions in a manner that making sure that they can now put some sort of sanctions or putting barriers for the Meccans to do the trade from Mecca to Sham. Okay, remember this is why I say all the time. It's good to know the complete picture of the things. We talked about this issue of how much wealth that they were the trade of how much money was involved to do the trade from Mecca to Sham. Does anybody remember? I mentioned that in one of the talks. Okay, so that was 250,000 dinar every year. At that time, and Mecca was not really an affluent society or anything. 250,000 dinar, $250,000 dinar we're talking about here, yeah? That's what it means? 250. Okay, and 1 dinar is 4.25 gram gold. So now you can multiply whatever number comes up. I think the time when I showed the numbers, it was close to around $60 million today's time. That was the amount of trade that they were performing from Mecca to Sham. So that would have hurt the Meccans. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he started placing this kind of barriers for their trade. Okay. Now, other thing that he did was he started making alliances, military alliances with the neighboring tribes as well. Okay. But when we say that there are alliances made here, this alliance is between states. We're not talking about an individual is going and making some alliances with this group or that group. That's not what it's talking about. These alliances were Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a ruler, as a hakim, he is making alliances here. Okay? So that's part of the foreign policy in Islam, that you can make treaties or make alliances. Of course, they will be within the boundaries of Islam. You cannot cross the boundaries Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has established. Okay. Then also, we already talked about last lecture also, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam already made some of the alliances or some treaties with the neighboring Jews also at that time. That's a different story, that they broke those treaties later on and they had to pay the price. Okay? So again, we have to understand the background of every action that we're looking into. Don't just take one thing out of context and start thinking this is the way an action is supposed to be done. Okay? Now going back, so for that purpose of whether it was geopolitical reason that Rasulullah was expanding his area of power or authority and putting barriers for the Meccans to do the trade. And the third thing happened was Rasulullah was making treaties and alliances with the neighbors. Now, for that, prior to the Battle of Badr, we see that there were about 8 different missions happened to the Battle of Badr, which was a first major battle that happened between the Muslims and the Kuffar. Okay. Now, this I already talked about, so I'm not going to go into this. Now, when we talk about those missions, there are actually there's a distinction we have to understand. One is called the Ghazwa, other is called Sariyah. When we say Ghazwa means Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself was the one who led the expedition. He was a leader. So there's an army behind him, and he's the one who's leading them. Whether the expedition turned into a battle or not, we refer to that as the Ghazwa. Second one, which is called Sariyah, this is the one that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam he appointed a Sahabi, one of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to lead that military expedition. That's called Sariyah. Okay. So these two things that you will see Many times it's been used in the books of the Seerah, and to a point, there are so many ghazawat Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam fought that some of the writers of the biography of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they even call the Seerah as maghazi, as books of maghazi. Okay, so he's giving me signals, so I cannot go further than 5 more minutes. Okay, so let's see what I got here. Okay, so I'm not going to go into those Sariya or the Ghazwat today. We'll go next week, inshallah, but I'll stress a little bit here. So as I mentioned, the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had 8 missions that included the Ghazwat and the Sariya of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 8. When I say 8, what it means by that is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he migrated from Mecca to Medina in which month? Anybody remember? Rabiul Awwal, right? As a matter of fact, you'll see that Rasulullah was born in Rabiul Awwal, migrated in Rabiul Awwal, and he passed away in Rabiul Awwal. Okay? So the people who sometimes you find them they're celebrating the birthday of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Eid Milad al-Nabi and all those things, they tend to forget that this is the day Rasulullah passed away. But anyways, that's a complete separate issue of celebration of the birthday of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is not done by Rasulullah, not done by Sahaba, not done by the next couple of generations. This is something that kids started off later on. And if it is done with this intention that you are getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a bid'ah. Okay? And again, another subject, digressing from the subject, I'm not going to go into this. But let's keep focused here. So what I'm saying here is, so Rabiul Awwal, this is the first year of the Hijrah. Okay? And anybody knows when the Battle of Badr happened? Which month? Ramadan. Good. Okay, so Ramadan is which month of the year? 9th month, right? Okay. And Rabiul Awwal is the 3rd month of the year, correct? Which year the Battle of Badr happened? 2nd year. Yeah? So we are only talking about 9 plus 9, 18 months from the time of migration until the Battle of Badr happened. So in 18 months, there were 8 battles already. So now you understand why some of the authors of the Seerah, instead of calling a Seerah, they call Maghazi, books of Maghazi. Okay? So let's not be the one who think of Seerah, I'm going to just talk about just those things which only individualistic part of Islam. Again, that's important to know all those things Rasulullah taught us for as individuals to do. Same way we have to know about Islam, which has to be applied in society as well. Okay? So I'm going to just end with this ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu udkhulu fi silmi kaffa wa la tattabi'u khutuwati shaytan innahu lakum aduwwun mubin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O you who believe, enter into Islam completely. And then ayah says, and do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. Which means if you don't follow, enter in Islam completely, whatever outside of Islam is following footsteps of shaitan. And he is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared to us, warned us very clearly, he's a clear enemy of the mankind. Okay? We'll stop here inshallah, and if there is any questions or comments, I will try to answer if I can.